everyone. Just redoing an older video with some new changes. So this is the 4WDing, some examples of do's and don'ts and some tips from my experience when I went down to Tim's some time ago. Now this is a particular scenario where this ute's got himself stuck in a very interesting position. And it's going to some angles that I can show you, but I just want to make note at this point. You can see the sloping of the ground from this angle, how it slopes backwards, and I will make mention of why that's important in a bit, but for that picture's sake, it was good to have a look. So you can see how bad this is. He's bottomed out altogether, and as he's trying to recover himself, he's just, most of his efforts is just dug himself deeper. And when you bottom out, you're just making more work for the car, and you can see how deep that back tire is sunken in, and how low to the ground he ends up becoming. And they've had multiple attempts of trying to recover using max tracks prior to what comes up next. So this is a view from behind, so you can see there's from where he originally got stuck, which is about 5 meters back, you can see it's quite deep, and they've tried to self-recover a few times where he's dug himself really in, bottomed out, tried to pull himself out with max tracks, and hasn't really gotten anywhere, trying to go forward rather than using gravity and go backwards. So this is from right back from when he went off the main rut line. The main rut line, you can see there, is really quite firm. I don't know why he went down there, but anyway, that's irrelevant. But he's down there in the soft stuff, and it's hard. So he's between a hard surface, soft surface, and a harder surface closer to where the water line is. I would suggest using the water line and reversing backwards and going down into the harder section. So this is a video where I took of that position just to pretty much walk you through how he got there. So this is the harder surface. You can see the softer surface to the left hand side where where you drive and you sink in quite deeply, and you'd have to accelerate quite heavily to continue momentum. And when it's accelerated, in this case, he's churning up that sand, and in the process digging deeper into the sand, and at one point obviously you lose that momentum and traction, and you basically end up bottoming out your car to a point that you stop. You can't go any further. So you can see how deep those lines are. You can see that further along you can actually see that the bottom of the car has actually been scraping along the bottom, even though there's a lot of tracks and people walking over it. And you can see how deep he's dug himself in. Now at this point you can see the angle that his vehicle's facing and where he was to start with. My personal suggestion would have been from that point, and especially the angle he's facing, would be simply max tracks and reverse backwards down onto the harder sand that's just to the left hand side of that screen where the water is. So instead they decide to use a snatch strap, and snatch straps, I'll do a separate video on how to use those properly, but in this case the guy that's doing the snatching in this vehicle, he's up in the main rut line on the firmer sand, and then there's a short little video of him snatching the guy out. There's a real method and proper way of doing this, which I'll do in a different video, but here's an example of this guy doing it. Front car should take up all the slack of the snatch and then start the pull, and then the reverse, the centre car behind should start accelerating as he does, but for some reason he's sliding to the right on an angle rather than trying to go straight, and he ends up on an angle up at the top and actually needs a second tug to get him in the right position. Now this is another example of someone who got stuck. At least this guy had a little bit more foresight, that when he started to lose traction, instead of digging himself deeper, he stopped and he got out and assessed the situation, and he ended up deflating his tyres. Would have avoided this situation if he had deflated his tyres to start with. You can see here that's where he's dug himself in, and how deep he's managed to continue turning his tyres until he realised he was needing to get out and make a change. So the best idea, deflate first rather than end up in this predicament and having to do it later. It also ruins the beach if you're going in with full PSI, so deflate avoids these problems and has a much better experience for yourself. Now this quick short video of that area. So this area of Thames, this plateau I'm sitting on, is normally quite firm. To the right of the start of the screen was quite firm, but this area here had all been churned up through the course of this weekend with a lot of cars with full PSI up, churning up this area, making it very soft, crisscrossing all over the shop, so there's no real main lines to follow a lot of other cars, which would put more effort on your own vehicle to be able to maneuver through this area without getting stuck. Whereas you can see this main line, if you were to follow that, you can see how much you don't sink in comparison to towards the left. You can see how much people sink in as they try and drive through the softer section, particularly as it gets churned up. That is normally pretty flat, and it's not normally looking like that. I don't know why on this particular day there was a lot of activity. I think that didn't help the fact. You can see up ahead the guy, he's still in the process of finishing off deflating his vehicle. I didn't get a chance to record him moving out, but once he's finished deflating, he actually manages to drive straight out. So if he had deflated to start with, he wouldn't be stuck there doing it now. So yeah, I'm harping on that factor because it is essential. Just deflate. Saves time and effort later. You can see he tried to conduct a U-turn there. I think go a bit closer, you can see that how much he's actually sunken into the softer sand as he's tried to force a really tight turn to get himself out, which has only caused himself to become stuck and start spinning his wheels. But at least he's realised the loss of momentum and how to fix it rather than having to use recoveries. Now this is a good example of what to do. This gentleman has tried to drive through. This is looking at the softer section up towards where the cars are, where the guy got bogged originally. So this vehicle, while I was there, had driven up, started to lose traction. So then he's reversed. You can see how on the previous video how much less you were sinking in, and here you can see the amount that you are sinking in, the amount of sand that's been flicked up as a result of that. You know it's softer, so he's reversed back to this harder section to gain the momentum to be able to get himself through the softer section up onto the main rut line. So you can see, yeah, that's the harder section, so he reverses back onto that and then goes forward. So the key important element is that is using that gravity advantage. Just don't try and force it to go uphill in the softer sand. It's only going to end up worse. Try and use the terrain to your benefit, and like this they did, reverse backwards, gain momentum and go through it. So that avoids the issue of having to be in a position like the other gentleman does and spend heaps of time trying to self-recover. So you can see here, this is his tracks that he took finally, and you can see it managed to get all the way up to the top main line on his second attempt. So just a few examples of some of the scenarios that people got themselves placed into, and hopefully some ideas about how not to get into those scenarios by staying in the right areas and using gravity and right recovery situations. Thanks for listening.